Good evening, everyone. I'm here today to talk to you about the economy of Brazil, which is one of the best countries in the world, and it has the 7th largest GDP. So why Brazil? As I said before, Brazil holds the 7th largest economy in the world, and this is largely because of energy production and industrial expansion, which is going to increase a lot within the next few years, adding about 2,000 jobs within just one project, and I'll talk about that later. And also there's a large population of Brazil, which means that there's more people to spend more money in the country, which is great for the economy. But really, why Brazil? So in Brazil, you can kiss people on the cheek without feeling awkward. You can interrupt people without feeling rude. And on Sundays, they eat pizza just for the heck of it, because after a long week, who doesn't enjoy a huge pizza with all of your family and all of your friends? Brazil also has some of the most agriculture and material supply out of all the countries in the world. Brazil is also going to host the 2016 Olympics, which will bring enormous amount of revenue and tourism to the country. And there's a lot of attractive people, as you may know from previous knowledge, and tourism is very high and the beaches are beautiful. In this graph right here, you can see that Brazil, which is the purple line, has the second highest growth rate of change of real GDP compared to all of the other countries. Right now, if you look down here, it's the second lowest, but the general trend is it's the second highest next to China, which shows that eventually the growth rate of the change of real GDP will go up. This is a picture of the Carnival in Brazil, which is hosted in Rio de Janeiro. The Carnival is the biggest carnival in the world, which hosts 2 million people per day. And within the next year, the visitors of the Carnival will increase by almost 2 times. And a lot of this will be tourists. So 2/3 of the people who come to the Carnival are tourists, which means that this is revenue coming in from other countries, which is very good for the economy. It stimulates a lot of growth. Brazil is one of the largest agricultural producers in the world. It's been adding lately more than the United States has to the world's agricultural production. In 2012, Brazil produced $100.35 billion worth of agricultural goods, and it's even more now that it's 2015. It's the world's 5th largest agricultural producer and exporter. And Brazil also is the world's largest land for agricultural production. So right now the economy might not be that high compared to what it usually is, but the land and the potential for Brazil to produce a lot of exports and increase its GDP is very high. Brazil is also the largest iron ore producer in the entire world. The world's largest ore mine is in Brazil, and they have huge plans in the future to develop this ore mine, and Brazil hopes to invest $40 billion in this one mine, and this is suspected to produce 2,600 jobs just from one project, which is what I was referring to before. Brazil also produces a lot of crude oil. As I said before, tourism is very high. It's the most visited country in South America, and it's grown tremendously since the year 2000, and tourism is projected to increase tenfold within the next few years. The World Cup brought a lot of interest, and so because of the interest that the World Cup brought, the Olympics are projected to bring a lot more interest as well. Summing that up, there's amazing weather in Brazil, amazing cuisine, a unique culture, and the nature is phenomenal, such as in the Amazon rainforest. It's the most biodiverse rainforest in the world, and this brings scientific research, and it also brings tourism. So stay tuned for more about Brazil.
Brazil has the largest rainforest in the entire world. as well, which draws many tourists to come visit the nature that they can see nowhere else in the world. They expect 380,000 people to come to the Olympics this coming year. The government and private sector have been taking on massive development projects to increase the infrastructure of Brazil to be able to handle this influx of people and hopefully handle the increased tourism that will come about from the exposure of the Olympics. Government spending has also increased as a percentage of the GDP over the last 4 years. It is currently at 20.2% of the GDP of Brazil. It has the 7th largest economy behind the United States, China, Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, and France. Nominal and real GDP have both grown over each of the last 4 years. This shows that Brazil is on a period of growth rather than in a recession or a depression. It has a 45% reserve ratio, which is great for investors because it means that the interest rate is high because banks have to reserve more of the money and so are less willing to loan it out, which means that if people want to borrow money, they have to pay more back, which is great for investors. And their president, Dilma Rousseff, she was the Minister of Energy. She was the president in 2010 as well as now. She cut her salary by 10% to give aid to the economy, and this shows that she personally has faith in the Brazilian economy, that it will continue to grow and to do better than it's done in the past. And what exactly does all of this mean? I'll let my good friend Rupert tell you what this means from an economic standpoint.
All right, time for the macro talk, all right? So we heard about all tourism, blah, blah, blah. What does that mean for your money? What does it mean for you as the investor? Let's find out. All right, so GDP, gross domestic product. As we all know, I'm sure you, a very smart investor, would know that GDP is the sum of all the consumer spending, government spending, investments, and net exports. So in this case, in Brazil, they have positive net exports, which means that they export more than import, which means they're producing more and giving up and trading with the global economy than they're taking in, which means in the end their economy is making more money. Consumer spending is higher just because of the sheer amount of tourism that we've talked about earlier, and this means that not only are people in Brazil demanding more and buying more, but also outside tourism coming in, so it means that there's more money. Total amount of money possible to spend is being increased. Government spending is on the rise, as we've heard from my good friend Ford. He talked about how Dilma Rousseff, the president, cut her salary by 10% just to give back to the government, and that little show of faith is just a simple part of saying how the government's prepared to spend more, prepared to invest more in the economy, and that's what you should be prepared to as well. Investments, and obviously that's where you come in. We want you to be able to invest in Brazil. We want you to help the GDP, and the more you help the GDP, the more it's going to go up, and the more it goes up is going to mean more confidence in other investors that may not be as rich as you find self. And so in the end, if all that increases, then we're going to have GDP rising, and that again will just help consumer investments, which just like yourself would help everyone. So interest rates. In Brazil, they have a really high reserve rate, which means that the banks can't loan out as much money that they normally could. So what a reserve rate is a customer will come in, they're going to give their deposit money to the bank, and the bank is required to keep a certain amount of that deposit within their reserves, and they can only loan out a certain amount, which means they're going to have a lower supply of loanable funds. And this means that the banks can't spend as much money, they can't put as much money out there in the economy, which means that people are going to be saving more, people are going to be not spending much, which means that the economy is just going to grow because of savings. And so this is all just because of the higher interest rates, and the higher the interest rates, the less spending there is. Because if the interest rates are high, you're more willing to save your money because your money's going to have more power in your savings accounts, in your banks, rather than spending it on the car, because you're going to lose, your money's going to lose a lot more value that way. You're going to have a greater return on investments because of the higher interest rates, and that just means more confidence in the consumer to save. And that's just overall good for the economy. So financial institutions, there are 5 major financial institutions, which include investment banks, commercial banks, government-sponsored mortgage lenders, pension funds, and insurance companies. And so what this means that they have all 5 is that Brazil is a diverse economy. It's able to function in multiple markets, and having all of these present is just it's a reassurance for you, the investor, as well as the people of Brazil, that the economy won't tank and do terribly. So most importantly, investment banks, that's what we as consumers use the most. That's what you as an investor would take most part in. Basically, the stronger your investment banking is, the more money can circulate through and the more power your money has, because it's going to go through more hands. It's going to be affected by the money multiplier more, so you can have your money can do more with less. So you as the investor can invest maybe $1 million, but it's going to have the effect of like 10 million, just because of how strong the investment banking market is. Another example, which is good for the economy, is like the insurance companies, which, as you know, insurance is you have all the customers pay a yearly premium, which protects them against the mishaps that could happen. So if, say, your house burns down, you paid money into it, but if your house burns down, you are safe from having a company come help you out, come give you money to build a new house, get a new house, stuff like that, keep you on your feet. And so if your country has a strong insurance market, then that means that your consumers are more willing and more confident in spending money on higher purchase items like a house or a car, because they know that if something bad happens, their purchases are secure. They know that if, hey, I'm going to go buy this really expensive apartment, but if it burns down, I know that the insurance company is going to help me out. So they're more confident and more willing to spend, which all goes back to GDP and how the higher the GDP is through spending, the more willing people are to invest like yourself, which would help you out a lot as well. So you have monetary and fiscal policy, which are 2 very influential things in many economies, specifically in Brazil. So monetary policy is a creation. So you can use monetary policy to create money, which would help the economy a lot. In this case, monetary policy is using is like pushing a string, as a great teacher once told me. Back in my day, I just remember he was a great man, had a great mustache too.
He was alright.
So what he did was he explained it as a metaphor as monetary policy is like pushing a string along. You can push it, it'll try to wiggle its way around. You won't really have like an effective way of moving. But fiscal policy, on the other hand, is a great way to move a string, because it's like pulling a string. It's a lot easier, it's more efficient, it's faster. In this case, monetary policy is done through the central bank of Brazil, which they control the investment, the interest rates, how people invest, why people invest, and encourage people to save or spend. So with the high interest rates that they have now, they're going to have more incentive to save, which in that case is going to decrease the money supply, because there's not going to be as much money throughout into the economy, people are going to be spending less. In the case of fiscal policy, though, the government has the ability to just make a huge open market purchase. They can throw a bunch of money into the economy. And in that case, like as my shipmate and good friend Ford over here is saying, you can just throw money all over the place, okay?
Woo,
so
make it rain.
And with fiscal policy, the government can just do that. They can make it's a lot easier and more efficient for the government to just throw money out there and have people want to spend more. The PPF, which is the Production Possibilities Frontier, that is basically how the government is functioning and how the economy is working. In this case, Brazil, like most countries, isn't like directly on the curve, which is okay, because that means that they're not 100% efficient with the resources they have and the things and the production they can possibly do. Most economies aren't. But in this case, they can do more because they have that ability. They're not at 100%, so there's room for improvement, which is where you, the investor, can come in. Think about it. If you invest more now, the curve can be, you can move from that little point and just move out onto the curve. Onto the curve's good, not in the curve's bad. Just keep that in mind. Get this idea in your head. Okay, cool. But if you invest now, it helps move Brazil onto the curve, and then it's just moving up in the world. GDP is going up, investments are coming in, and think about it, you invested first. You're going to make more money because investments are coming in after you. You got on the train early. You're the early bird, not the second mouse. So aggregate supply and demand. So in Brazil, aggregate supply is where it's at right now. Production possibility frontier, yeah, that's where it is. It can move up, supply can increase, but in your case right now, demand is what you're worrying about, because the Olympics are coming, demand could be increasing a lot. If you get in now, you invest now, demand's going to be flying up after you invest, which means just more money in your pocket. Keep that in mind. More money's good.
We would like to thank you for taking the time out of your very busy day to watch this silly little video that we made.
Silly.
And that's all we have to say about that.
Oh my goodness gracious.
All right.